doing my own research, I realized that there's a big portion of our population that have become seniors, particularly those of my generation, the baby boomers, struggling to find answers to their questions. So I thought maybe there is an audience out there who might be willing to listen to me, to explore things, to journey with me as I grapple with the questions that I have in my own life now that I've become a senior citizen. I think that part of the beauty of life is that many things remain to be a mystery, and that grappling with the questions is sometimes more important with finding answers. Hi, this is Louie Montalbo, and this is my first podcast. Next year, I'll be turning 62. I was born in 1962, and I remember when I turned 60, it was 2 years ago. I remember my father, Leonardo, when he turned 60, he started to retire after more than 4 or 5 decades of working in government. And by the time he turned 60 and retired, I remember that for the next about 25 years or 30 years until his death, when he was 85, all he did was in the afternoon go to a mall, spend time there, have his merienda or snacks, and that was practically the entire thing that he did during the time of his retirement until his death. I began to think that why is my life so different from what he was or what he did after he turned 60? Maybe because I'm raising a son who's only 11 years old right now. Maybe because I'm still fully employed in the school where I'm an administrator. Which means between those two things, I have many more things to do. And even if there are moments where I wanted to rest, I wanted to slow things a bit, I knew that the challenge and the situation of my life right now, that is something I cannot afford to do. When a friend of mine raised the possibility of doing a podcast about becoming a senior citizen, I initially dismissed the very idea. One, my generation is not very adept in social media. We are not used to showing ourselves, explaining ourselves, and revealing ourselves to social media. Second is I'm an introvert. I'm a very private person. I really don't like talking about myself, which means that if I do a podcast, I will have no choice but to talk about myself at some point. Third, I really don't like people who seem to have all the answers to all the questions. I think that part of the beauty of life is that many things remain to be a mystery, and that grappling with the questions is sometimes more important with finding answers. And when I see people who seem to know everything, have all the answers to their questions, it kind of irritates me. But yet, after thinking it through a little bit more and doing my own research, I realized that there's a big portion of our population that have become seniors, particularly those of my generation, the baby boomers, struggling to find answers to their questions. So I thought maybe there is an audience out there who might be willing to listen to me, to explore things, to journey with me as I grapple with the questions that I have in my own life now that I've become a senior citizen. So perhaps this is an opportunity for us to be together and see what are the things that we are struggling with, what are the things that we are asking ourselves, what are the challenges that we are confronting. Maybe there's also an audience out there for those who have not yet reached their senior age but are interested to become more prepared, more ready when the time comes when they become senior citizens. What are some of the topics that I've thought of? One, and again, this is something that I've researched on a little bit. What are the areas of concern of those who have turned senior citizen? One, I think, is the whole notion of retirement. People who retire, there seems to be two options for people who have turned 60 or 65. They retire and completely just, spend their time doing very little else that's considered to be work. But there seems to be a growing population of senior citizens who have opted not to retire in the traditional sense. How is that like? How does one make an option or decide on whether or not to fully retire and not to work anymore? That's one topic that I thought might be interesting for us to explore. The second one is something very personal to me. Just a few months ago, I lost a very good friend of mine who was my friend way back from college. I said a while ago, I'm a very introvert person and I have very, very few friends, very, very few people that I confide with. So when a very good friend of mine, a very close lifetime friend of mine passes away, I feel that the circle of friends that I have become smaller and smaller. And I've searched for in the internet that really says that people who are seniors are becoming more and more lonely, have become to distance themselves from other people, are struggling to find connections, either because they have lost friends and family members along the way, or don't know how to deal with or to gain new friends. The opportunities for making new friends become less and less. So I think the whole notion, the whole experience of isolation, loneliness, maintaining connections, I think is an important topic for us to talk about. Again, I'm not here to have all the answers. I'm here to work with you, perhaps, for those of you who are listening to my podcast, and see maybe we could find answers to these questions together. The other one, I think, is connected to the first point I mentioned. Sense of purpose, sense of meaning. Many of us who have retired, when we were working, our work provided us with a sense of meaning and connection and purpose. When we are raising our families, raising our children, whether as a father or as a mother, that in itself as well provides us with a sense of meaning and purpose. What happens when all of those have ended? We've retired, we're not working anymore. All our children have flown the coop, have their own lives, and we find ourselves just being by ourselves. What happens next? Is the question of purpose something that is only the luxury of the young? Or do old people, the senior people, also need to find a different, a renewal sense of purpose and meaning in their lives? What happens if we don't? What happens if we, as we grow older, we lose our sense of meaning and purpose? How does that impact our mental and physical health? And if that is a concern, then what do we do about it? Another area that I think that might be interesting for us to talk about is this is something that's going to be very awkward for many people. Money and financial security. Given the challenges of our world right now, I don't know how many of us can actually say we are financially secured in our retirement. For those of us who are still working, those of you who are listening to me, this might be a good opportunity for you to also begin to prepare yourselves when you become a senior citizen and retire. But for those of us who are already retired and feel still not financially secured, what can we do about it? For this, perhaps we will be able to find some experts who can help us along the way. Another area that I want to explore probably, and this is something very personal to me, is the whole notion of spirituality, faith in God, being able to grapple with the mysteries of life, so to speak. My own history as a person has led me to many, many paths where I was exploring who I was and who I was in relation to my God. But I realized and I noticed that as I grew older, the answers that satisfied me when I was younger about who God was and what faith was all about, the answers have totally changed. I'm not even sure if I have all the answers right now. And I continue to grapple with them. Which leads me to the next point. I think many people who are growing older realize that as they become older, they are more and more aware of their own mortality, of their own imminent death, perhaps. So how do we deal with that? How prepared are we for that? Is that something that we are ready to talk about? Which brings me again to that whole question of What is life after death? Or is there? So many of these things I will share with you from my own personal perspective. As I said, not to be able to share with you all the answers to all of these questions. But perhaps together we can grapple with these questions. So I cannot imagine myself talking to you right now. So perhaps we will be able to set up something where you'd be able to share with me your own thoughts, perhaps. See if we are able to find ways of communicating with each other. All I know is that based on the research that I have made, many of us are struggling with these questions that I have been discussing with you for the past few minutes. This is something that I am striving to look into, that I'm grappling with, that I'm struggling with, and hopefully if we do this together, perhaps we won't feel as alone as we would have been if we're doing this by ourselves. And so I hope to be able to see you again in my next podcast so that we will be able to find ways of being together. Thank you very much and see you soon. Oh, by the way, the name of the podcast that I'm thinking of is Senior Moments. I think for all of us who are in my generation, we know what that means already. And I think it's a catchy way of describing the moments we will be together as seniors. So again, thank you very much. Next time. For our next episode on Senior Moments with Louie Montalbo. Social isolation was associated with about 50% increased risk in dementia. I thought that by the time I reach a certain age, I will have to content myself with old friends, friends of life, of my life. So when I find myself entering and maintaining new relationships of deeper meaning, I do try to nurture them very, very well. Being lonely is not a given when we get old. I think it is something that we can work on by giving ourselves, no matter how old we are. And I think the older we are, the more we have the feeling of the need of being understood and being